The cabin smelled of dust and forgotten memories. Every creak of the wooden floors beneath my feet sent my heart racing. A constant reminder that I didn't belong here. Outside, the pine trees whispered secrets to one another as the wind brushed through their branches, creating a symphony of rustling leaves that both soothed and unsettled me. I'd been here 3 days. 3 days since I'd grabbed my daughter Emma and fled in the middle of the night with nothing but a backpack, some cash, and the crushing weight of terror on my shoulders. 3 days of jumping at every sound, of hushing Emma's innocent questions about when we could go home, of forcing myself to eat just enough to keep going. The cabin had been my grandfather's hunting retreat, abandoned for years after his death. No one in my family had wanted it. Too remote, too rustic, too many memories. Perfect for disappearing, perfect for hiding from a man who controlled half the city with a whisper. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." Emma's small voice called from the threadbare couch, where she sat clutching the stuffed rabbit I'd managed to grab during our escape. "Coming, sweetheart," I said, my voice steadier than I felt as I filled a plastic cup from our dwindling supply of bottled water. At 4 years old, Emma was too young to understand why we'd left our apartment, why we couldn't call her friends, why Mommy flinched at every car that passed on the distant road. I handed her the cup, brushing a strand of dark hair, so like her father's, from her forehead. The thought of Ryan sent a familiar ache through my chest. He'd been gone 2 years now, killed in what the police called a random mugging. I knew better. Nothing in Ryan's life had been random, especially the debts he'd accumulated with the wrong people. Debts I'd discovered were still very much unpaid. "Can we go outside today?" Emma asked, her innocent eyes wide with hope. "I want to see the squirrels again." "Not today, baby. It's too cold." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. The autumn day was actually perfect, crisp and golden, the kind Ryan and I used to spend walking through the park before Emma was born, before everything fell apart. A sudden vibration from my pocket made me freeze. The burner phone I'd purchased with cash at a truck stop 3 towns over rarely made any sound. I'd given the number to no one. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out. One new text message from an unknown number. "Running was a mistake, Olivia. My lungs forgot how to work." The room tilted sideways. How? How had he found me? I'd been so careful. Cash only. Back roads. No contact with anyone from my old life. "Mommy? Your face looks funny." Emma's voice seemed to come from far away. I forced a smile. "I'm okay, sweetie. Why don't you draw a picture for a while? Use the crayons we bought yesterday." While Emma settled on the floor with her paper and crayons, I paced the small cabin, checking and rechecking the locks on the doors and windows. Not that they would stop him if he really came. Nothing stopped Adrian Costas when he wanted something. The memory of our first meeting flashed unbidden through my mind. I had been working as a server at La Speranza, an upscale Italian restaurant that catered to the city's elite. I'd taken the job after Ryan's death, desperate for the generous tips that helped pay for Emma's daycare and our tiny apartment. Adrian had arrived with an entourage of serious-faced men in expensive suits, commanded the private dining room with nothing more than a glance, and somehow, despite being surrounded by beautiful women dripping in diamonds and designer clothes, his eyes had found me. I remember the shock of that first eye contact, the intensity of his gaze cutting through the dimly lit restaurant and pinning me in place. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things often are, sharp edges and perfect symmetry, dark eyes that missed nothing, a mouth that rarely smiled but when it did, transformed his entire face, the 1982 Bordeaux, he'd said when I approached his table, his voice a low rumble that seemed designed to be heard above all others. "And whatever the chef recommends for the table," I'd nodded, trying not to stare at the perfect cut of his black suit, the heavy gold watch on his wrist, the way everyone at the table deferred to him without him having to say a word. I'd known immediately who he was. Everyone in the city knew Adrian Costas, even if the papers never printed what he really did for a living. What I didn't know then was that Ryan had stolen from him before his death. What I couldn't have guessed was that Adrian Costas believed that debts didn't die with people, they passed to their families, or that he would decide I was the payment he wanted. A loud crack from outside snapped me back to the present. Emma's head jerked up from her drawing. "What was that?" she whispered. "Probably just a branch falling," I said, but my body was already moving, gathering Emma and pulling her toward the tiny bedroom at the back of the cabin. "Let's play a game, okay? Hide and seek. You need to be very quiet and hide under the bed until I come get you." "But I'm drawing—" "Emma," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Please. It's important." Something in my expression must have communicated the urgency, because she nodded solemnly and crawled under the bed without further protest. I pulled the worn quilt down to better conceal her and pressed a finger to my lips. "Not a sound until I come back, no matter what. Promise me." "I promise, Mommy," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear she didn't understand, but had somehow absorbed from me. I closed the bedroom door and moved back through the cabin, grabbing the kitchen knife I'd kept within reach since our arrival. The weight of it in my hand did little to calm my racing heart. I peered through the grimy window beside the front door, searching for the source of the noise. Nothing moved in the clearing surrounding the cabin, just wind-stirred leaves and lengthening shadows as the afternoon sun began its descent. Maybe it really had been a falling branch. Maybe. The knock on the door was so unexpected, so ordinary in its rhythm, 3 precise taps, that for a wild moment I wondered if I'd imagined it. Then it came again, more insistent. "I know you're in there, Olivia." His voice, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as intoxicating, cut through the wooden door as if it weren't there at all. "Open the door before I'm forced to damage this charming property." My fingers tightened around the knife handle. Run? There was no back door, only windows, and where would I go? If he'd found me here, he'd find me anywhere. And Emma. 5 seconds, Olivia. Something in his tone, the absolute certainty that I would comply, sparked a flare of defiance through my terror. I stepped forward and yanked open the door, knife held in front of me like a shield. Adrian Costas stood on the porch, one hand raised as if he'd been about to knock again. He looked exactly as I remembered from our brief encounters at the restaurant, immaculately dressed in a charcoal suit despite the remote location. Dark hair swept back from his forehead, jawline sharp enough to cut glass. Behind him, a black SUV with tinted windows idled in the clearing, a hulking figure standing beside it. His eyes, those penetrating dark eyes that seemed to strip away every defense, flicked from my face to the knife and back again, his mouth curved in the ghost of a smile. "Planning to cook dinner?" he asked, his accented voice deceptively light. "Planning to protect my daughter," I countered, hating the tremor in my voice but refusing to back down. "How did you find us?" Adrian didn't answer. Instead, he looked past me, taking in the cabin's sparse interior with a sweep of his gaze. "May I come in?" "No." His eyebrow arched at my refusal, as if no one had ever denied him entry before. Perhaps no one had. "It wasn't a request, Olivia." He stepped forward, and despite myself, I retreated. He moved past me into the cabin, his expensive cologne cutting through the musty air like a blade. My grip tightened on the knife, but we both knew I wouldn't use it, couldn't use it. His bodyguard remained outside, but his presence was an unspoken threat. Adrian surveyed the cabin, the sagging couch, the kitchenette with its ancient appliances, the scattered toys that betrayed Emma's presence. Something dark flashed across his expression. "This is where you choose to bring a child? No running water? Questionable electricity? Miles from civilization?" His voice held a note of genuine incredulity. "What exactly was your plan? Winter is coming. Would you have her freeze to demonstrate your stubbornness?" "We were safe here," I said, the lie obvious to us both, until you came. He turned to face me fully, and the full force of his attention was like standing in the path of an oncoming train. "You were never safe from me, Olivia. The sooner you accept that reality, the easier things will be for both of us." My hand shook, the knife point dipping toward the floor. "What do you want from me? Ryan's been dead for 2 years. Whatever he took, whatever he owed you, I don't have it. I'm a waitress. I have nothing." "That's where you're wrong." Adrian moved closer, and it took everything in me not to back away. "You have something very precious to me." Fear for Emma surged through me like a physical force. "My daughter has nothing to do with this." A flash of surprise crossed his face, quickly masked. "I'm not here for the child. Then what? You, Olivia. He reached out, one finger lightly touching the hand that held the knife. Even that small contact sent electricity up my arm. Your husband didn't just steal money from me. He stole time. Time I could have had with you. I stared at him, uncomprehending. What are you talking about? The first night you served my table, I knew. His voice dropped lower, becoming almost hypnotic. There's a reason I requested you personally every time after. There's a reason I left those tips that paid your rent. Did you never wonder why a man like me would frequent a mediocre Italian restaurant 3 times a week? My mind raced through those evenings, his intense gaze following me, the generous tips, the way he'd sometimes engage me in brief conversation about inconsequential things, the weather, the wine, a book I'd been reading during my break. You were watching me, I whispered, the realization dawning with horror. All this time. Protecting you, he corrected smoothly, until I discovered what your husband had done, what he had kept from me. A sudden cry from the bedroom shattered the moment. Emma. Adrian's head snapped toward the sound, his body tensing. Don't, I said desperately, the knife coming back up between us. Please, she's just a child. Without warning, the cabin door burst open. The bodyguard I'd seen by the car filled the doorway, his expression grim. Sir, we have company. 2 vehicles approaching fast. Adrian's expression hardened instantly. Gone was the man speaking of protection and desire, replaced by something cold and calculating. He pulled a gun from beneath his jacket with practiced ease. Get the child, he ordered me, moving to the window and peering out. Now. Who is it? I asked, not moving. People who want what Ryan took, people who will use you and your daughter to get it. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something that might have been fear, not for himself, but for us. People who lack my restraint. The distant sound of engines grew louder. Adrian looked at his bodyguard. Marco, secure the vehicles. Be ready for immediate departure. As Marco disappeared outside, Adrian turned back to me. Olivia, we have perhaps 2 minutes before this becomes very unpleasant. I suggest you get your daughter and anything essential. You're leaving with me. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a demand. It was simply a statement of fact, delivered with such absolute certainty that argument seemed futile. And yet, why should I trust you? I asked, even as I took a step toward the bedroom. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. Because unlike them, I don't want to hurt you. I never did. The sound of screeching tires on the gravel road made my decision for me. I dropped the knife and ran for the bedroom, throwing open the door and dropping to my knees. Emma, come out, baby. We have to go. Her tear-streaked face appeared from beneath the bed. Are the bad men here? The question stopped my heart. What bad men, Emma? The ones Daddy said would come if we weren't careful. The ones who hurt him. Ryan had never told me about any specific threats, had shielded me from the reality of his dealings. But he'd prepared our daughter? No time to process that now. I pulled Emma into my arms and grabbed our backpack, already packed with essentials, a habit I'd developed during our flight. When we emerged from the bedroom, Adrian was by the door, gun at his side, face set in hard lines as he looked out the window. He turned when he heard us, his expression softening almost imperceptibly at the sight of Emma clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Hello, little one," he said, his voice gentler than I'd ever heard it. Emma buried her face in my neck, refusing to look at him. "We need to move," Adrian said to me, all business again. "Stay behind me. When we reach the SUV, get in the back seat with her and keep down." A gunshot cracked through the air outside, making me jump and Emma whimper. Adrian cursed under his breath. "Change of plans. Back door? There isn't one," I said, panic rising in my throat. His eyes narrowed as he calculated options. Bathroom window? Too small. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Adrian made a decision. Kitchen window. Now. He moved with us to the kitchen, where a small window overlooked the dense woods behind the cabin. With the butt of his gun, he smashed the glass, clearing the frame of shards. "I'll go first, then take Emma," he said, holstering his weapon and hoisting himself through the opening with a grace that belied his size. From outside, he reached back in. "Give me the child." I hesitated only a moment before lifting Emma toward the window. "It's okay, baby. This man is going to help us." "I don't want to go with him," she cried, clinging to me. "Emma, please," I begged. "Remember how we practiced being brave? I need you to be brave now." Something in my voice must have reached her because she reluctantly loosened her grip, allowing Adrian to take her through the window. I heard him murmuring something to her, soft, reassuring words I couldn't make out, before his hands appeared again for me. I grabbed our backpack and his hands, letting him pull me through the window with surprising strength. We found ourselves in a small clearing, the woods just yards away. "This way," Adrian said, already moving with Emma in his arms. She looked tiny and vulnerable against his broad chest, her eyes wide with fear as she reached for me. I followed them into the tree line just as shouts erupted from the front of the cabin. Heavy footsteps, the crack of the front door being kicked in. Whoever they were, they had arrived. "Down!" Adrian hissed, pulling me to a crouch behind a fallen log. He set Emma beside me, one hand on her head in a strangely protective gesture. "Stay here. Don't move until I return." "You're leaving us?" I whispered, panic clawing at my throat. His dark eyes met mine with an intensity that stole my breath. "I'm eliminating a threat to what's mine. I'll be back for you." Before I could process the possessive claim or the deadly promise in those words, he was gone, moving silently through the trees toward the cabin and whatever waited there. Emma's small hand found mine, squeezing with a strength born of terror. I pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, wondering how my life had spiraled to this point. Crouching in the woods, depending on the protection of a man who terrified me almost as much as the unknown men hunting us. In that moment, I knew with complete certainty nothing would ever be the same again. The forest grew darker as twilight descended, transforming familiar shapes into looming shadows. Emma trembled against me, her small body radiating fear as gunshots echoed from the direction of the cabin. I covered her ears and whispered reassurances I didn't believe myself, counting seconds that stretched into minutes that felt like hours. "When can we go home, Mommy?" she whispered against my neck, her voice so small it fractured something inside me. "Soon, baby," I lied, stroking her hair. "What home?" Our apartment wasn't safe. The cabin was compromised. I had nowhere to take her, no way to protect her on my own. The sudden silence was almost worse than the gunfire. I strained to hear anything, voices, footsteps, the rumble of car engines, but the forest had gone eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. "Stay here," I whispered to Emma, settling her behind the fallen log. "Don't move. Don't make a sound. I'm going to look." Her fingers clutched desperately at my jacket. "Don't leave me. I'll be right back. Count to 100, okay? By the time you finish, I'll be back." She nodded reluctantly, her lips moving silently as she began counting. I squeezed her hand once before rising to a crouch and moving carefully toward the edge of the trees. Staying low and in the shadows, the cabin was still standing, but the front door hung askew on broken hinges. No movement, no sound. The black SUV remained where it had been parked, but two other vehicles, a silver sedan and a black pickup truck, were now haphazardly positioned in the clearing, their doors left open. I was so focused on the scene before me that I didn't hear him approach until his hand closed over my mouth from behind. I fought instinctively, twisting and striking backward with my elbow, but my attack met solid muscle that didn't yield. "Quiet," Adrian's voice hissed in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. "It's me." He released me slowly, and I turned to find him looking much less immaculate than before. A smear of blood stained his white shirt cuff, and a darkening bruise was forming along his jaw. His eyes, though, were the same. Intense, focused, missing nothing. "Where's Emma?" he demanded. "Hidden, safe," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady given the jackhammer rhythm of my heart. "What happened? Who were they?" "Volkov's men," he said. The name clearly meant to mean something to me. When I showed no recognition, his expression darkened. "Your husband never told you who he was working with?" I shook my head. "Ryan kept certain aspects of his life separate." Something like disgust flickered across Adrian's face. "He kept you in the dark while painting a target on your back. Admirable." The bitterness in his tone sparked my defensive instinct. He was trying to protect us. He failed. The blunt assessment hung in the air between us. We need to move. Get Emma. I wanted to argue, to defend Ryan's memory, but this wasn't the time. Instead, I turned and moved quickly back to where I'd left Emma. She had curled into a tight ball behind the log, still counting quietly, her eyes squeezed shut. 78, 79, 80, Emma, I whispered, touching her shoulder gently. Her eyes flew open, relief washing over her face as she launched herself into my arms. You came back. Of course I did. I'll always come back for you. I held her close, wondering if that was a promise I could keep. Adrian appeared beside us, scanning the forest with wary eyes. We need to move now. My car is waiting at the access road, half a mile east. Your bodyguard? I asked, remembering Marco. A shadow passed over Adrian's expression. Taking care of loose ends. The cold calculation in his voice sent a chill through me. This man had almost certainly just killed people. And here he stood discussing it as casually as one might mention picking up groceries. Emma stared up at him, her eyes huge in her pale face. Are you one of the bad men? I tensed, waiting for his reaction to her innocent yet damning question. Adrian crouched down to her level, surprising me. His voice, when he spoke, held none of the hardness he'd directed at me. There are many kinds of bad men in this world, little one. Some want to hurt you. Some want to protect you. His dark eyes met Emma's without flinching. I'm the kind who protects what belongs to him. Emma considered this with the solemn thoughtfulness only children can muster. Does Mommy belong to you? My breath caught. Before I could intervene, Adrian's mouth curved in a slight smile that transformed his severe features. Yes, he said simply. She just doesn't know it yet. Heat rushed to my face, anger, fear, and something else I refused to name. Emma, we need to go now. Can you be brave and walk quietly through the forest with us? She nodded, clutching her rabbit tighter. Adrian straightened and turned without another word, clearly expecting us to follow. With no better options, we did. The forest grew darker as we walked, the trees closing in around us. Adrian moved with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going, occasionally reaching back to steady me when I stumbled on unseen roots or rocks. Emma walked beside me, her small hand clutched in mine, remarkably quiet despite her exhaustion. After what felt like forever, the trees thinned, revealing a narrow dirt road where a sleek black Mercedes waited, engine idling. Adrian opened the rear door, gesturing for us to get in. Where are you taking us? I asked, hesitating at the door. Somewhere safe, he replied, a hint of impatience in his tone. Questions later, Olivia. The use of my name, the way it rolled off his tongue like he'd said it 1,000 times in private, sent another inappropriate shiver through me. I pushed the feeling away and helped Emma into the back seat before sliding in beside her. The interior of the car smelled of expensive leather and Adrian's cologne. The driver, another suit-clad man with the same vigilant eyes as Marco, didn't turn or speak as Adrian took the seat opposite us. As the car pulled away, Emma's exhaustion finally caught up with her. She slumped against me, her eyes fluttering closed despite her efforts to stay awake. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing deep and even. I envied her ability to find rest in the midst of chaos. My own mind raced with questions, fears, and the growing suspicion that I'd just traded one dangerous situation for another. Adrian watched us from across the spacious back seat, his expression unreadable in the dim light. The silence stretched between us until I couldn't bear it any longer. You said Ryan stole time from you, I whispered, careful not to wake Emma. What did you mean? His gaze shifted to the window, where the darkened countryside blurred past. Your husband approached me for a loan 2 years before his death, a substantial amount. For what? He claimed it was for a business investment. In reality, he was paying off debts to the Volkovs. Adrian's jaw tightened. The terms of my loan were generous, but included certain provisions. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. What kind of provisions? His eyes returned to mine, holding me captive with their intensity. An introduction to his beautiful wife. A dinner, perhaps. The beginning of an acquaintance. I stared at him, struggling to process this revelation. You're saying Ryan agreed to... what? Pimp out his wife to settle a debt? No. Adrian's voice sharpened. I'm saying I saw you once, at a charity event where you accompanied Ryan, and I wanted to know you. The loan was business. The introduction would have been personal. But it never happened, I said slowly, trying to piece together this bizarre narrative. Because Ryan realized who you could become to me. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping lower. He saw how I watched you that night, and instead of honoring our agreement, he disappeared with my money, taking you and hiding you in plain sight in that miserable apartment under your maiden name. My head spun with this new information. Ryan had changed our last name shortly after Emma was born, claiming it was for a fresh start. We'd moved across the city, and he'd insisted I quit my job at the art gallery. I'd love to stay home with Emma. At the time, I'd believed it was because he wanted me to enjoy motherhood. Now, I wondered if he'd been hiding me. You couldn't possibly have felt anything for me from one glimpse at a charity event, I said, disbelief evident in my voice. Something dangerous flashed in Adrian's eyes. Don't presume to tell me what I can or cannot feel, Olivia. The car slowed, turning onto what appeared to be a private road flanked by tall iron gates that opened as we approached. Beyond them, a massive house emerged from the darkness, a modern fortress of stone and glass perched on a hillside, lights glowing warmly from within. Where are we? I asked, peering through the window. My home. Adrian straightened his cuffs, a gesture so normal it seemed out of place after the violence of the past hour. One of them, at least. The car circled a fountain before stopping at the front entrance. Before the driver could exit, Adrian was opening his own door and coming around to our side. He opened the door quietly, mindful of the sleeping child. She needs to rest, he said, looking at Emma's exhausted face. I'll have a room prepared for her. The casual way he slipped into making decisions for my daughter reignited my anger. We're not staying here. Adrian's expression hardened. The Volkovs now know you exist. They believe you have what Ryan took. The fact that you don't won't matter to them. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. They will find you, Olivia, and they will use that child to make you give them what you don't have. Is that what you want? Fear coiled in my stomach. No. Then for once in your life, accept help when it's offered. He straightened, nodding to the driver who had appeared silently beside the car. Dmitri will carry her inside. I tightened my hold on Emma. I can carry my own daughter. Something like approval flickered across Adrian's face. As you wish. I slid out of the car with Emma in my arms, her weight a familiar comfort, as I followed Adrian up the stone steps to the front door. It opened before we reached it, revealing an elegant woman in her 60s, with steel-gray hair pulled into a perfect chignon. Mrs. Petrov, Adrian addressed her with unusual deference. Prepare the blue suite for our guests. The child will need a bed. Of course, Mr. Costas. Her accent was similar to Adrian's, Eastern European, but softened by years in America. Her sharp eyes took in my disheveled appearance and the sleeping child in my arms, but her expression remained neutral. This way, please. She led us through a marble foyer, larger than my entire apartment, and up a sweeping staircase. The house was a study in restrained luxury. No gaudy displays of wealth, just impeccable craftsmanship and materials that whispered, rather than shouted their value. The blue suite turned out to be a spacious bedroom with an adjoining sitting room and bathroom, all decorated in various shades of blue and cream. A king-sized bed dominated the bedroom, while a smaller room connected to it held a twin bed that looked perfect for Emma. I'll bring up some nightclothes, Mrs. Petrov said, her eyes softening slightly as she looked at Emma. And perhaps something for the little one to eat when she wakes? Thank you, I said, grateful for this small kindness in the midst of madness. As Mrs. Petrov left, Adrian remained in the doorway, watching as I gently laid Emma on the bed and removed her shoes. Why are you doing this? I asked without looking at him, carefully tucking a blanket around my daughter's sleeping form. I told you. I protect what's mine. I turned to face him, keeping my voice low but intense. I am not yours. I never agreed to be the payment for Ryan's debt. Adrian's expression remained impassive, but something dark and possessive flickered in his eyes. The dead is irrelevant now. It died with him. Then what do you want from me? He moved into the room then, closing the distance between us with slow, deliberate steps. I held my ground, refusing to back away even as every instinct screamed for me to run. What I've wanted since I first saw you, he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through my chest. The chance to know you, the opportunity to make you see that your life before now, the struggling, the running, the fear, was unnecessarily difficult. And in return, his mouth curved in that barely there smile that transformed his face. You're already assuming there's a price. Perhaps that's Ryan's legacy, teaching you that everything comes with conditions. He reached out, one finger lightly tracing the line of my jaw. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk properly. The gentle touch sent electricity racing across my skin. I stepped back, wrapping my arms around myself. You're not what I expected. Curiosity replaced the intensity in his gaze. And what did you expect? Someone crueler, less controlled. I searched for words to describe the monster I'd constructed in my mind. The kind of man who would kill without hesitation. I am that man, Olivia. The simple admission hung in the air between us. Never doubt it. But not with you. Never with you. Before I could respond, Mrs. Petrov returned with a stack of folded clothing and a covered tray. Adrian nodded to her and stepped back. I'll leave you to rest, he said. There are guards posted throughout the property. You and Emma are safe here. He paused at the door, his dark eyes finding mine one last time. Don't try to leave. It would disappoint me. The soft click of the door as it closed behind him was somehow more ominous than a slam would have been. Mrs. Petrov busied herself laying out the clothes. Silk pajamas that looked my size, a small nightgown for Emma, and basic toiletries. The bathroom is fully stocked, she said, gesturing to the adjoining door. There's food under the cover when you're hungry, and a phone by the bed. Dial 0 if you need anything. Her kindly efficiency reminded me of my own grandmother, making the surreal situation feel even more disorienting. Mrs. Petrov, I said as she turned to leave. What kind of man is he, really? She paused, considering her answer carefully. Mr. Costas is a complicated man, dangerous to his enemies, loyal to those under his protection. Her eyes, sharp despite her age, met mine directly. If he has decided you are his to protect, then you are fortunate. If he has decided you are his to possess... She left the sentence unfinished, a small shrug completing the thought more eloquently than words could have. After she left, I checked the door. Not locked, but what difference did it make? Where would I go? How far would I get with Emma before Adrian's men, or worse, these Volkovs, found us? I moved to the large window overlooking the manicured grounds. Security lights illuminated the perimeter, and I could make out the shapes of men patrolling. Guards, Adrian had called them. Or jailers, depending on your perspective. Emma stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible before settling again. I watched her for a moment, struck by how peaceful she looked, unaware of the danger surrounding us, trusting that I would keep her safe. But could I? Was Adrian right? Was staying here, under his protection, the best chance we had? I sank onto the edge of the bed, the weight of the day crashing down on me all at once. The cabin, Adrian's arrival, the attack, the revelations about Ryan, it was too much to process. One thing was clear. The life I thought I'd had with Ryan had been built on lies. He'd been involved in something dangerous enough to get him killed, something that now threatened Emma and me. He'd hidden me from Adrian for reasons I still didn't fully understand. And Adrian Costas, the man I'd been taught to fear, the criminal, the monster, had saved us. For now. The question that haunted me as exhaustion pulled me toward unwilling sleep was simple. At what price? Morning arrived with disorienting brightness. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. The softness of the bed, the quality of light filtering through unfamiliar curtains, the silence unmarred by city noise all felt wrong. Then memory crashed back. The cabin, the attack, Adrian Costas. I sat up with a jolt, looking for Emma. Her side of the bed was empty, the covers thrown back. Panic surged through me as I scrambled out of bed, calling her name. "Emma! Emma!" The door to the small adjoining room stood open. I rushed through it to find a perfectly appointed child's bedroom, but no Emma. My heart hammering, I was about to run into the hallway when the main door opened. Mrs. Petrov entered carrying a breakfast tray, her expression mildly surprised at finding me wild-eyed and frantic. "Your daughter is having breakfast with Mr. Kostas on the terrace," she said calmly, setting down the tray. She woke early and was quite insistent about exploring. "Mr. Kostas thought it best to let you sleep." Relief made my knees weak, quickly followed by indignation. He had no right to take her without asking me. Mrs. Petrov's expression remained neutral, but something like sympathy flickered in her eyes. "Perhaps you should tell him that yourself. The terrace is at the end of the hall, through the double doors." I glanced down at my borrowed silk pajamas, midnight blue, perfectly fitting, and far too revealing for a confrontation. "I need to change first. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you. Mr. Kostas had them brought in this morning." She gestured toward a door I hadn't noticed the night before. The casualness with which Adrian made these arrangements, my clothes, my breakfast, my daughter, sent a fresh wave of anger through me. I thanked Mrs. Petrov stiffly and waited for her to leave before investigating the closet. Inside hung a selection of clothing that was both beautiful and practical. Jeans in my size, cashmere sweaters, blouses in silk and cotton. Nothing ostentatious or overtly sexy, but all of it expensive and tasteful. I chose the most modest option, jeans and a cream-colored sweater that felt like wearing a cloud. After a quick visit to the bathroom, where I found every possible toiletry I might need already laid out, I headed down the hallway in search of the terrace. The morning light revealed details of Adrian's home I'd missed in the darkness. The original artwork on the walls, the antiques mixed with modern furnishings, the overall sense of masculine elegance without ostentation. This was not the gaudy display of new money I might have expected from a man in Adrian's position. It spoke of old wealth, cultivated taste, and a confidence that didn't need to announce itself. I pushed open the double doors at the end of the hall and stepped onto a stone terrace overlooking a manicured garden that gave way to forest beyond. The view was spectacular, the morning sun casting long shadows across the rolling landscape. And there, at a table set with china and silver, sat Adrian Kostas with my daughter on his lap. Emma was giggling as he helped her spear a piece of fruit with her fork, his dark head bent close to her blonde one in a tableau of domestic intimacy that stopped me in my tracks. The sight was so incongruous, this dangerous man being gentle with my child, that I couldn't immediately reconcile it with the Adrian I'd glimpsed last night. Emma spotted me first. "Mommy," she called, wriggling off Adrian's lap and running to me. "Mr. Adrian has strawberries and chocolate milk." I crouched to hug her, scanning her face for any sign of distress, but found only the excited flush of a child being indulged with treats. "Did you sleep well, baby?" She nodded enthusiastically. "I have my own room with stars on the ceiling, and Mrs. Petrov found me a new dress." She twirled to show off a simple blue dress I'd never seen before. "It's beautiful," I said, rising to my feet and turning my attention to Adrian, who had stood when I appeared. He looked as immaculate as ever, in dark trousers and a white shirt, open at the collar. Casual for him, I supposed, but still more formal than most men's business attire. "You should have woken me," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "You needed rest." He gestured to the empty chair across from his. "Join us for breakfast." It wasn't a request, but I was too hungry to refuse on principle. I took the seat, lifting Emma onto my lap when she rushed back to the table. A server appeared as if conjured, pouring coffee into a delicate cup before silently withdrawing. Adrian watched me over the rim of his own cup, those dark eyes missing nothing. "Your daughter is quite intelligent," he said, his accent more pronounced in the morning light. "She's been teaching me about her rabbit's adventures." Emma nodded solemnly. "Mr. Flopsy has been to the moon," she informed me with absolute conviction. I smoothed her hair, still tangled from sleep. "I'm sure Mr. Kostas has more important things to do than hear about Mr. Flopsy," I said carefully. "On the contrary," Adrian replied, setting down his cup. "I found her stories fascinating, particularly the parts about her father." my hand stilled in Emma's hair. "What did she tell you?" Instead of answering directly, Adrian turned to Emma with a gentle smile that transformed his severe features. "Perhaps you'd like to see the horses, little one? Mrs. Petrov can take you." Emma's eyes widened. "You have horses?" "3. And I believe one of them would be very happy to meet you." "Can I, Mommy?" Emma turned to me, her excitement palpable. I hesitated, torn between keeping her close and allowing her this small joy after days of fear and confinement. "I'll be able to see her from here the entire time," Adrian said quietly, accurately reading my concerns. "The stables are just beyond that garden wall. She'll be perfectly safe." After a moment's more hesitation, I nodded. "Okay, but listen to Mrs. Petrov, and don't go near the horses without her." Emma was already scrambling off my lap. Adrian pressed a small button on the table, and within moments, Mrs. Petrov appeared as if she'd been waiting nearby. After brief instructions from Adrian, she took Emma's hand and led her down the stone steps into the garden, Emma chattering excitedly the entire way. As soon as they were out of earshot, I turned to Adrian. "What did she tell you about Ryan?" He refilled my coffee cup before answering, a strangely domestic gesture from such a dangerous man. "She said her father taught her a game called hiding, and that sometimes bad men might come. And if they did, she should hide and not make a sound until you or her father came for her." His eyes met mine across the table. "A rather specific thing to teach a 4-year-old, wouldn't you say?" A chill ran through me despite the morning warmth. "I didn't know he'd told her that. Your husband kept many secrets, it seems." Adrian's tone was neutral, but something darker lurked beneath the surface. "Did you never wonder where the money came from? The apartment, the clothes, the toys for Emma?" I stared down at my coffee, shame and anger mixing into a toxic brew. Of course I wondered, but whenever I asked, he'd get defensive or change the subject. After a while, I just stopped asking. "Easier that way," Adrian observed, no judgment in his tone, until it wasn't. My head snapped up. "You don't get to criticize my marriage. You didn't know Ryan. You didn't know us." I knew enough. Adrian leaned forward slightly, his intensity sharpening. "I knew he was working for the Volkovs while pretending to be a legitimate businessman. I knew he stole from them, then came to me for protection in the form of a loan. And I knew, from the moment he saw how I looked at you, that he would never honor our arrangement. This arrangement, this introduction you wanted, what exactly did it entail?" I challenged, unable to stop myself. "Were you planning to what? Court me? Seduce me? While I was married to another man?" Something dangerous flashed in Adrian's eyes, there and gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "I wanted the opportunity to know you, to allow you to know me. What happened after that would have been your choice." "My choice," I repeated skeptically. "Does anyone really have choices around you, Adrian? Or do they just have the illusion of choice while you manipulate circumstances to get what you want?" A small smile curved his mouth. "You're not afraid to speak your mind. I like that." The casual compliment threw me off balance. I took a sip of coffee to hide my confusion, using the moment to gather my thoughts. "What did Ryan take from the Volkovs?" I asked finally. "Why are they after us now, years later?" Adrian's expression grew more serious. "Information. The kind that could destroy their organization and send several high-ranking members to prison." "What kind of information?" "Names, dates, bank accounts, evidence of certain activities that cross lines even in our world." Adrian selected a piece of fruit from the platter before him, the mundane action at odds with the gravity of his words. "Your husband was Volkov's bookkeeper. He had access to everything." I shook my head in disbelief. "Ryan was an investment advisor. He worked for Meridian Financial. A convenient front. Meridian is owned by a shell company controlled by the Volkovs. It allows them to launder money through legitimate investments." Adrian studied my face. "You truly didn't know." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "No, I didn't know." The magnitude of my ignorance crashed over me like a wave. "So Ryan stole this information and then what? Blackmailed them?" "He tried. It went badly." Adrian's voice held no sympathy. "When that failed, he came to me, ostensibly for protection. What he really wanted was leverage, an alliance with a rival that would make the Volkovs hesitate to move against him. And you gave him money instead, I said slowly, piecing it together. Why? Adrian's gaze shifted to the garden, where Emma was now carefully petting the nose of a chestnut horse under Mrs. Petrov's watchful eye. I told you why. The implication hung in the air between us. For me. He'd given Ryan money because of me, a woman he'd glimpsed at a charity event and developed some kind of obsession with. That's insane, I said finally. You couldn't possibly have felt anything real from one brief sighting. His eyes returned to mine, dark and fathomless. When I was 12 years old, my father took me to the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. In one of the galleries hung a painting. Nothing famous, just a small landscape by a minor artist. But something about the quality of light, the way the artist had captured a fleeting moment of perfect beauty. He paused, his gaze intense. I stood before that painting for an hour, while my father concluded his business elsewhere in the museum. 25 years later, I still remember every detail. Some things imprint themselves on you instantly, Olivia. You were such a thing. The unexpected poetry of his words robbed me of response. This was not the crude criminal I'd expected, not the thuggish caricature that Ryan's few references had painted. Before I could formulate a reply, a man appeared at the terrace doors. Not a server, but someone with the same watchful alertness as Marco and the driver from last night. Sir, he said deferentially, there's a situation requiring your attention. Adrian's expression hardened instantly, the momentary vulnerability vanishing behind a mask of cool authority. Excuse me, he said to me, standing. Please, finish your breakfast. I'll have Mrs. Petrov bring Emma back shortly. Without waiting for my response, he followed the man inside, leaving me alone with my swirling thoughts and the spectacular view that now felt like a beautiful prison. I watched Emma in the garden below, her small face alight with joy as she fed the horse a carrot under Mrs. Petrov's guidance. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months. The realization sent a pang through my heart. Had I been so consumed by grief and worry that I'd failed to see how our precarious existence was affecting her? The server reappeared to refresh my coffee and inquire if I needed anything else. I asked for some fruit for Emma, and he withdrew with a small bow that felt oddly formal. When he'd gone, I allowed myself to really look at my surroundings. Adrian's home was set on what appeared to be hundreds of acres of private land. The terrace where I sat overlooked not just gardens but forested hillsides that stretched to the horizon. In the distance, I could make out what might have been a lake, glinting in the morning sun. Beautiful, isolated, secure, perfect for keeping someone hidden away from the world. The thought sent a chill through me despite the warming day. Was that Adrian's intention? To keep us here, hidden away like treasures in a private collection? The painting analogy he'd shared suddenly felt less romantic and more possessive. I was so lost in thought that I didn't hear him return until his voice came from behind me. You look troubled. I turned to find Adrian standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I'm trying to understand what happens now, I said honestly. He moved to retake his seat across from me. Now you and Emma stay here, under my protection, until I've resolved the situation with the Volkovs. And how long will that take? As long as necessary. His tone made it clear that this wasn't negotiable. We can't just disappear from our lives indefinitely, Adrian. I have a job. Emma has preschool. People will notice we're missing. Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. You've already disappeared, Olivia. You fled your apartment 3 days ago. You haven't shown up for your shifts at La Speranza. No one has reported you missing, which suggests you don't have anyone close enough to notice your absence. The brutal truth of his assessment stung more than I wanted to admit. Since Ryan's death, I'd withdrawn from friends, focused solely on survival and caring for Emma. There was no one who would miss me immediately. No family nearby. No close friends who checked in regularly. What about Emma? I tried again. She needs stability, routine. She can't just stay here indefinitely. Why not? Adrian gestured to the expansive grounds. There's space to play, animals, fresh air. Mrs. Petrov was a teacher before she came to work for me. She could continue Emma's education. She would want for nothing here. The casual way he rearranged our lives, making decisions that should be mine, ignited my anger again. And what about what I want? Or does that not factor into your plans? What do you want, Olivia? His question seemed genuinely interested. To return to your cramped apartment? Your exhausting job with its meager tips, looking over your shoulder, wondering when someone will recognize you or Emma? I want freedom, I shot back. The right to make my own choices. Freedom is an illusion for most people. They're constrained by poverty, by obligations, by the very systems they believe protect them. Adrian's voice held no judgment, only a matter-of-fact certainty. What I offer is security, protection for both you and Emma. At what price? I asked, the question that had haunted me last night finally spoken aloud. His dark eyes held mine. Is it so difficult to believe I might want to give you these things without demanding payment? Yes, I said simply. No one gives something for nothing. A sad smile curved his mouth. Ryan taught you that lesson well. The mention of my husband sparked fresh anger. Don't talk about him like you knew him. I knew him better than you did, it seems. Adrian's blunt response hit like a physical blow. The man you're defending kept you in the dark about his criminal activities, used you as a shield, and left you vulnerable to his enemies after his death. Are those the actions of someone who loved you? You have no right to question his love for me, I said. But the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. Adrian seemed to sense my wavering conviction. His voice softened slightly. I'm not asking you to vilify his memory, Olivia. I'm asking you to see the reality of your situation clearly, without the comforting fictions you've constructed. What reality is that? That you're alone. That the Volkovs believe you have something they want. That without my protection, you and Emma are in genuine danger. He leaned forward, his intensity drawing me in despite my resistance. And that I am offering you safety without conditions, asking only that you stay here where I can ensure it. Without conditions, I repeated skeptically. You expect me to believe you're doing all this, risking your own safety, bringing strangers into your home? Out of what? The goodness of your heart? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. I didn't say my motives were altruistic. I want you here, Olivia. I've wanted you here since the moment I first saw you. The difference between me and the Volkovs, between me and Ryan, is that I won't take what isn't freely given. The raw honesty in his voice silenced my retort. Before I could formulate a response, the sound of Emma's laughter floated up from the garden. We both turned to see her racing across the lawn, with Mrs. Petrov following at a more sedate pace. She seems happy, Adrian observed quietly. I couldn't deny it. The carefree joy on my daughter's face was something I hadn't seen in too long. She's 4. Give her horses and strawberries and she's easily pleased. Perhaps there's wisdom in that simplicity, he said, rising as Emma burst onto the terrace, her cheeks flushed with excitement. Mommy, the horse's name is Duchess, and she let me pet her nose, and it was so soft, and Mrs. Petrov says maybe tomorrow I can sit on her if you say it's okay. The words tumbled out in a breathless rush as she launched herself at me. I caught her, inhaling the clean scent of her hair, mixed with the earthy smell of horses. That sounds wonderful, baby. Did you say thank you to Mrs. Petrov? Emma nodded earnestly before turning to Adrian. Thank you for the horses, Mr. Adrian. Something in his expression softened as he looked at her, a genuine warmth that seemed at odds with everything I thought I knew about him. You're very welcome, little one. Perhaps later we can visit the lake as well. There are ducks that might appreciate some bread. Emma's eyes widened with delight, and she looked to me for confirmation. The hope in her face made my heart ache. How long had it been since she'd had a day without worry, without sensing my fear? We'll see, I said, not wanting to make promises I might not be able to keep. For now, let's have some more breakfast. I asked for fruit for you. As if on cue, the server reappeared with a small plate of sliced fruit arranged in the shape of a flower. Emma gasped with delight, her previous excitement about horses momentarily forgotten in the face of this new wonder. Adrian stepped back, watching our interaction with an intensity that made me uncomfortably aware of his presence. I have some business to attend to, he said finally. Mrs. Petrov will show you around the grounds if you wish. Consider this your home for now, Olivia. You'll find there are no locked doors. No locked doors, perhaps. But I had no illusions about the guards I'd glimpsed patrolling the property. This beautiful estate was still a gilded cage. As if reading my thoughts, Adrian added softly. The security is to keep others out, not to keep you in. Remember that. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Emma, who was carefully selecting pieces of fruit from her plate. She has your eyes, but the rest, she favors her father. Something in his tone made me look up sharply, but he was already walking away, leaving me to wonder at the strange note of... what? Bitterness? Regret? Is Mr. Adrian your friend, Mommy? Emma asked, oblivious to the tension in the air. I hesitated, searching for a simple truth in the complex reality. He's helping us right now, baby, Emma nodded, accepting this with a child's easy trust. I like him. He talks to me like a big person, not a baby. The observation, so simple yet perceptive, gave me pause. Emma was right. Adrian had spoken to her with the same seriousness he used with adults, never adopting the condescending tone many people used with children. It was a small thing, yet it complicated the image I was trying to maintain of him as simply a dangerous man with obsessive tendencies. Like everything about Adrian Costas, the reality was proving far more complex than I had anticipated. As I helped Emma with her breakfast, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was balanced on a knife's edge. On one side lay safety, security, and a life of protected luxury for my daughter. On the other, a freedom that might prove more dangerous than I could handle alone. And beneath it all, the growing certainty that Adrian Costas would not wait forever for me to choose. Days at Adrian's estate fell into an unexpected rhythm. Each morning, I woke expecting to feel like a prisoner, but instead found myself adapting to a life more peaceful than any I'd known since Ryan's death. Emma blossomed under Mrs. Petrov's gentle guidance, spending her days exploring the gardens, visiting the horses, and delighting in the simple joys of childhood without the shadow of fear that had followed us for so long. Adrian himself was often absent, his business taking him away for hours, or sometimes full days. When he was present, he maintained a careful distance, never pushing for more than conversation, never making demands. Yet I felt his eyes on me constantly, watching with an intensity that should have frightened me, but instead stirred something I wasn't ready to name. By the 5th day, the initial shock had worn off, leaving me in a strange limbo, not quite a guest, not quite a prisoner, existing in a bubble of luxury, while questions about our future remained unanswered. That afternoon, I found myself in Adrian's library, a room that had quickly become my sanctuary. 2 stories of books lined the walls, accessible by a rolling ladder that slid smoothly along brass rails. The scent of leather bindings and old paper hung in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of the coffee I'd brought with me. Emma was napping under Mrs. Petrov's watchful eye, giving me a rare moment of solitude. I trailed my fingers along the spines of first editions and rare volumes, marveling at the collection. My art history degree, unused since Emma's birth, had left me with an appreciation for beautiful things, and Adrian's library was filled with them. Find anything interesting? Adrian's voice came from the doorway, startling me. I turned to find him watching me, dressed more casually than usual in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that softened his usual severity. The effect was disconcertingly appealing. You have a first edition Hemingway, I said, gesturing to the shelf before me, and what appears to be an original copy of Blake's Songs of Innocence. Surprise flickered across his face. You know Blake? I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. I studied art history before Emma. Blake's illustrations were part of the curriculum. What would you have done with that degree? He asked, moving into the room but keeping a respectful distance. If life had taken a different turn. The question caught me off guard. No one had asked about my abandoned dreams in years. I wanted to work in museum curation. I had an internship at the Hillman Gallery lined up. But then I got pregnant, and Ryan thought it would be better if I stayed home with Emma. Ryan thought, Adrian repeated, a note of disapproval in his voice. And what did you think? I looked away, uncomfortable with his perception. It made sense at the time. Childcare is expensive, and my starting salary would barely have covered it. And now? If circumstances were different, the question stirred dormant ambitions I'd buried deep after Ryan's death, when survival became my only priority. Emma starts kindergarten next year. I'd thought maybe then I could look for something in my field again. Adrian nodded thoughtfully, moving to a cabinet nestled between bookshelves. He opened it to reveal a collection of art books, pulling out a large volume and bringing it to where I stood. "Perhaps this might interest you," he said, handing me the heavy book. I took it, reading the title with surprise. Private Collections of Eastern Europe. Hidden Masterpieces of the 20th Century. It was a museum-quality publication, the kind that cost hundreds of dollars, and was typically found only in university libraries. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the thoughtful gesture. "I look forward to reading it." Something like pleasure crossed his face, a brief softening around the eyes, gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "I have a small collection myself. Nothing as significant as what you'll find in those pages, but perhaps tomorrow I could show you." "You collect art?" The revelation shouldn't have surprised me given the evidence of his taste throughout the house, but somehow it did. "I collect beauty in various forms," he said, his gaze holding mine for a beat too long. "Things that speak to me on a level beyond mere appreciation." The double meaning wasn't lost on me. Heat crept up my neck as I looked away, pretending to examine the book's cover. "Olivia." His voice softened, compelling me to meet his eyes again. "I've been patient. I've given you space to adjust, to see that my intentions toward you and Emma are honorable. But we need to discuss what happens next." The moment I'd been both anticipating and dreading had arrived. I set the book aside, squaring my shoulders. "And what has happened next, Adrian? That depends on you." He moved to the leather chair near the window, gesturing for me to take the one opposite. When we were both seated, he continued. "The situation with the Volkovs is complicated. They believe you have the information Ryan stole, or at least know where it is. I've told you, I don't know anything about any information," I said, frustration coloring my voice. "Ryan never told me about his work with them." "I believe you." Adrian's steady gaze conveyed his sincerity. "But they won't. Not without proof." A chill ran through me. "What kind of proof?" "The kind that would satisfy men who deal in absolute certainty." His jaw tightened. "Which is why you and Emma need to remain here, under my protection, until this is resolved permanently." "Permanently," I repeated, the word hanging between us. "What exactly does that mean?" Adrian leaned forward slightly, his intensity drawing me in despite my resistance. "It means I remove the threat entirely. The Volkovs have crossed a line by targeting you and Emma. In our world, there are rules about involving innocents, especially children. Their actions have given me justification to move against them in ways that would otherwise upset certain balances of power." The casual way he discussed what sounded like warfare between criminal organizations sent a shiver down my spine. "And if I don't want to be part of whatever moving against them entails?" "You're already part of it, Olivia." His voice held no cruelty, only a pragmatic certainty. "The moment Ryan stole from them, the moment he came to me for protection, he made you part of this world. The only choice you have now is whose protection you accept." Anger flared, hot and sudden. "That's not a choice at all. It's the only one available to you at present." Adrian's expression remained impassive, but something like regret flickered in his eyes. "I wish I could offer you alternatives that wouldn't endanger you or Emma. I can't." The truth in his words doused my anger as quickly as it had ignited. "So we stay here, hidden away, while you..." "What? Go to war with the Volkovs? How long will that take? Weeks? Months? Years?" "Not years," he said with certainty. "But I won't lie to you. It won't be resolved overnight. These things require careful planning, strategic moves." I stood abruptly, needing to move, to breathe. "And in the meantime, Emma and I just exist in this beautiful prison, waiting. What kind of life is that for her? For me?" Adrian rose as well, but didn't approach. "This isn't a prison, Olivia. You could make a life here, a good one. Emma already seems happy. You could pursue your interest in art, perhaps even work with my collection. When the situation is resolved, you could have the freedom to come and go as you please." "As I please? Or as you permit?" I challenged, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Do you truly believe I brought you here to keep you captive? That I want you only as a possession to be displayed and controlled? I don't know what you want. I admitted, the fight draining out of me. You speak of protection, of safety, but there's more. I see it in the way you look at me. I hear it in your voice when you talk about Ryan. Adrian was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more intimate. What I want is simple, if not easy. I want you to choose me, Olivia. Not because you need my protection, or because you have no alternatives, but because you want me as I want you. The raw honesty in his voice left me speechless. This wasn't the negotiation of a mafia boss or the manipulation of a captor. This was the confession of a man who had harbored feelings I couldn't begin to comprehend, feelings that had apparently begun with a single glimpse across a crowded room and survived years of absence. I barely know you, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Then know me? He took a step toward me, still maintaining enough distance that I didn't feel crowded. Ask me anything. I will answer with complete honesty. The offer hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to retreat, to maintain the emotional distance I'd cultivated since our arrival. But another part, a part I'd thought died with Ryan, was undeniably curious about the complex man before me. Why me? I asked, the question that had plagued me since that night at the cabin. Of all the women in the world, why fixate on a glimpse of someone at a charity event? He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I've asked myself the same thing many times. The simple answer is that I don't know why you affected me so powerfully. I only know that you did. He moved to the window, looking out at the gardens where Emma had played earlier. I saw you across that ballroom, laughing at something Ryan said. There was a quality to your smile, a genuineness that seemed out of place in a room full of people playing parts. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You weren't calculating your next move. You were simply present, luminous in your authenticity. His description made me uncomfortable. I wasn't the luminous creature he described. I was just me. You've built me up in your mind to be something I'm not. Adrian turned back to me, his gaze direct. I don't think I have. The woman I've come to know these past days. The mother who would do anything to protect her child. The woman who stands her ground even when afraid. Who questions me when others wouldn't dare. She's exactly who I believed you to be. His words touched something deep inside me. A place starved for recognition. How long had it been since anyone had seen me, truly seen me, as more than Ryan's widow or Emma's mother? What about Emma? I asked, changing the subject to safer ground. If we stayed, what place would she have in your life? In this world you inhabit? A shadow crossed his face. Emma would be under my protection, given every advantage, every opportunity. She would want for nothing. That's not what I asked, I pressed. Would you see her as yours? Or would she be an obligation you accepted to have me? Adrian's expression darkened. I don't consider children obligations, Olivia. I consider them sacred. Emma would be family, protected, cherished, raised with every privilege I could provide. Even though she's Ryan's daughter? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Something complicated flickered across Adrian's face. Pain, anger, resignation. She is your daughter. That's what matters to me. The simple declaration held such conviction that I found myself believing him. Whatever his feelings about Ryan, and they were clearly complex and largely negative, they didn't extend to Emma. Before I could respond, Mrs. Petrov appeared in the doorway, Emma's small hand in hers. My daughter's face was still flushed with sleep, her hair mussed from her nap. I'm sorry to interrupt, Mrs. Petrov said, her sharp eyes taking in our positions, the tension in the air. But Miss Emma has awakened and was asking for her mother. Mommy! Emma broke free from Mrs. Petrov's gentle hold and ran to me. I crouched to catch her, inhaling the warm, sleepy scent of her. Did you have a good nap, baby? I asked, smoothing her hair. She nodded against my shoulder before pulling back to look at Adrian. Mr. Adrian, can we see the ducks now? You promised yesterday. The transformation in Adrian's expression was remarkable. The intensity that had marked our conversation melted away, replaced by a gentleness I was still struggling to reconcile with what I knew of him. "If your mother agrees," he said, deferring to me with a respect that surprised me. Emma turned her pleading eyes to me. "Please, Mommy. Mrs. Petrov says I need a jacket because it's getting cooler, but she found one for me already." I hesitated, looking from Emma's hopeful face to Adrian's carefully neutral one. This simple request represented so much more, an acceptance of our current situation, a step toward the life Adrian was offering. "All right," I said finally, rewarded by Emma's delighted squeal. "But only for a little while. It will be dinner time soon." Adrian's eyes met mine over Emma's head, gratitude evident in their dark depths. "Thank you," he said softly, and I knew he wasn't just thanking me for agreeing to the duck pond. The walk to the lake was almost painfully domestic. Emma skipped ahead on the stone path, stopping to examine interesting rocks or fallen leaves, while Adrian and I followed at a more sedate pace. Mrs. Petrov had provided a small bag of bread crusts for the ducks, which Emma clutched with the serious responsibility of a child entrusted with an important mission. "You have a beautiful home," I said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between us. Adrian glanced at me, a hint of surprise in his expression. "Thank you. It's been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather purchased it when he first came to America." "From Russia?" I asked, realizing how little I actually knew about him. "Ukraine, originally, then St. Petersburg." Something in his tone suggested complicated history. "My grandfather was resourceful in difficult times." "A diplomatic way of saying he was involved in the same line of work as you," I observed. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The family business has evolved over the years, but yes, essentially." "And your parents?" His expression shuddered slightly. "My father continued the tradition until his death 10 years ago. My mother passed when I was young." "I'm sorry," I said automatically, then added with more genuine feeling. "About your mother, I mean." Adrian nodded, acknowledging the clarification. "She was a remarkable woman. Strong, intelligent, cultured. She insisted I learn piano, literature, art appreciation, civilizing influences, she called them." His gaze drifted to Emma, who had run ahead to the edge of the small lake now visible through the trees. She would have liked Emma. The simple statement held such wistfulness that I found myself wondering about the man beneath the dangerous exterior, the boy who had lost his mother, the son who had been taught to appreciate beauty alongside whatever brutal lessons his father had imparted. We reached the lake just as Emma had begun tossing breadcrumbs to a pair of mallards that swam eagerly toward her. Her delighted laughter echoed across the water as more ducks appeared, quacking demandingly for their share. "Mommy, look! They're so hungry!" she called, her entire face alight with joy. I moved to stand beside her, showing her how to break the bread into smaller pieces so it would last longer. Adrian remained a few steps back, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Something between longing and contentment. When Emma had exhausted her supply of bread, she turned her attention to the small dock that extended into the lake. "Can we go out there?" "It's getting late," I began, but Adrian stepped forward. "The dock is quite safe," he said. "I had it rebuilt last summer. Just stay away from the edge." Emma looked to me for permission, and after a moment's hesitation, I nodded. She ran ahead, her excitement palpable as her small feet thumped against the wooden planks. Adrian and I followed more slowly, the weathered dock solid beneath our feet. At the end, Emma crouched down to peer into the water, pointing excitedly at tiny fish darting among the reeds. "This is nice," I admitted quietly, watching my daughter's innocent wonder. "Peaceful." Adrian stood close beside me, his presence warm in the cooling evening air. "It could always be like this," he said softly, his voice for my ears alone. "You and Emma, safe, happy, free to enjoy simple pleasures without looking over your shoulder." I wanted to resist the picture he painted, to remind myself of all the reasons to be wary of him, and the life he offered. But standing there, watching Emma's uncomplicated joy after months of tension and fear, I found my resistance weakening. "What happens if I say yes?" I asked, barely audible over the gentle lapping of water against the dock. "If I agree to stay, to give this a chance, what exactly am I agreeing to?" Adrian was silent for a long moment, as if weighing his words carefully. You would be agreeing to allow me to court you properly, Olivia, to build something real between us, at whatever pace feels right to you. There would be no demands, no expectations beyond honesty. Emma would have stability, safety, and as much normalcy as possible given the circumstances. And if, after a time, I decided it wasn't working, I pressed, needing to understand the parameters of this proposed arrangement. If I wanted to leave, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I would not force you to stay, but I would ensure you had a safe place to go. A new identity, resources, protection from a distance. I would not abandon you to the Volkovs, or anyone else who might wish you harm because of your connection to me. It was more than I had expected, this acknowledgement that I might ultimately reject him, this promise of continued protection without possession. It spoke of a respect I hadn't anticipated. And us? I asked, gesturing between us. Physically, I mean. A flash of heat in his eyes was quickly controlled. As I said, at whatever pace feels right to you. I have waited years already, Olivia. I can be patient. The simple declaration sent an unexpected shiver through me. The attraction between us was undeniable, a current of electricity that seemed to intensify with each day that passed. I had tried to attribute it to Stockholm Syndrome, to the natural response to being protected by a powerful man, but I knew, with growing certainty, that it was more than that. I need time, I said finally, honesty compelling me to add, not to decide if we'll stay. I know we don't have better options right now, but to understand what it means, what you mean to me. Adrian nodded, acceptance in his expression. Time you shall have. Emma's excited voice broke the moment between us. Mommy, Mr. Adrian, look, a turtle. We both turned to see her pointing at a small painted turtle, sunning itself on a partially submerged log near the dock. Adrian crouched beside her, his voice taking on a teaching tone as he explained about the turtle's habits and habitat. Emma listened with rapt attention, asking questions that Adrian answered with surprising knowledge and patience. Watching them together, this dangerous man gentling himself for a child's curiosity, I felt something shift inside me. The simplistic image I'd constructed of Adrian Costas was crumbling, revealing complexities I was only beginning to understand. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting golden light across the lake, Adrian suggested we return to the house for dinner. Emma, tired but happy, slipped her small hand into his without hesitation as we walked back along the stone path. The sight of their joined hands, her tiny fingers engulfed by his much larger ones, created a lump in my throat I couldn't explain. Halfway back to the house, Emma's steps began to drag with fatigue. Without comment, Adrian lifted her into his arms, settling her against his chest, as if he'd done it 100 times before. She laid her head on his shoulder, her eyes heavy with contentment. "You're strong like my daddy was," she murmured sleepily. I tensed, waiting for Adrian's reaction to the comparison. His expression flickered briefly, but his voice remained gentle when he replied, "Is that so?" Emma nodded against his shoulder. "Daddy used to carry me like this when I was tired. But then he went to heaven, and Mommy had to carry me instead. But she's not as strong as you. Your mother is stronger than you know," Adrian said, his eyes finding mine over Emma's head. Just in different ways. Something in his gaze, respect, admiration, desire, made my chest tighten. This man saw me in ways Ryan never had, valued parts of me I'd forgotten existed. The thought was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. By the time we reached the house, Emma was asleep against Adrian's shoulder, her face peaceful in the gathering dusk. He carried her all the way to her room, laying her gently on her bed, with a tenderness that made my heart ache. "She didn't eat dinner," I whispered, standing in the doorway. "She can have something when she wakes," he replied softly, stepping back to allow me to remove her shoes and cover her with a light blanket. I pressed a kiss to her forehead before following Adrian into the hallway, closing the door partway behind us. "Thank you," I said, meaning it for more than just carrying Emma. "For today, for being patient." He studied me in the dim light of the hall, his expression so open and vulnerable for a moment that it stole my breath. "I would wait forever if necessary, Olivia. But I hope it won't come to that." Before I could respond, a discreet cough from the end of the hallway drew our attention. One of Adrian's security men stood there, his expression apologetic but urgent. "Sir, there's a call you need to take immediately." The transformation was instantaneous. The gentleman who had carried my sleeping daughter vanished, replaced by the controlled, dangerous figure I'd first encountered at the cabin. "Excuse me," he said to me, his voice cooler, more distant. "Please, have dinner without me. I'll find you afterward if it's not too late." Without waiting for my response, he followed his security man down the hall, leaving me alone with my swirling thoughts and the growing realization that I was standing at a crossroads. Whatever choice I made in the coming days would irrevocably change the course of my life, and Emma's. The question was whether I had the courage to choose a path that led toward Adrian Costas, rather than away from him. 3 weeks passed in a strange, suspended reality. The seasons shifted deeper into autumn, painting the forests surrounding Adrian's estate in brilliant golds and crimsons. Emma settled into a routine that included lessons with Mrs. Petrov in the mornings and explorations of the grounds in the afternoons. She flourished in this environment of safety and attention, her nightmares fading, her laughter becoming more frequent. As for me, I found myself in a peculiar limbo. True to his word, Adrian had been patient, respectful, never pushing for more than conversation, shared meals, and the occasional walk through the gardens. Yet the tension between us grew with each passing day, an electric current that seemed to intensify whenever we were in the same room. I'd begun working with his art collection as he'd suggested, cataloging pieces and researching their provenance. The work gave me purpose, rekindling my passion for art history, while providing a welcome distraction from the complicated feelings I was developing for a man I should, by all rights, fear. That evening, I sat in the library updating the catalog with information on a recently acquired Modigliani sketch. The work was absorbing enough that I didn't hear Adrian enter until he spoke. "You look at home here." I glanced up to find him watching me from the doorway, something like satisfaction in his expression. He'd been away for 2 days on business I didn't ask about, and his return sent an unwelcome flutter through my chest. "The collection is impressive," I said, closing the leather-bound catalog, though I'm still not entirely convinced that Degas is authentic. A smile touched his lips, thus proving your expertise. "It's not. A very good forgery that I keep to remind myself to be thorough in my acquisitions." I laughed despite myself. "A rather expensive lesson. Some lessons are worth the price." He moved into the room, settling into the chair opposite mine. "How is Emma?" The question was part of our routine now. His genuine interest in my daughter's well-being never waned. "She's fine. Mrs. Petrov took her riding today. According to Emma, Duchess is now her horse, and she wants to know if she can have riding lessons." Adrian nodded as if this were perfectly reasonable. "I'll arrange for an instructor. There's a woman in town who specializes in teaching young children." "Adrian," I began, uncomfortable with his easy generosity. "You don't need to." "I want to," he interrupted gently. "It makes her happy. It costs me nothing but money, which I have in abundance." I fell silent, still struggling with the dynamic between us. Every time I asserted boundaries, he respected them. Every time I expressed concerns, he addressed them. He was unfailingly generous without being overbearing, attentive without being possessive. It made it increasingly difficult to hold on to my wariness. "There's been a development," he said after a moment, his tone shifting to something more serious. "With the Volkovs." My head snapped up, tension immediately coursing through me. "What kind of development?" Adrian's expression remained calm, but I'd learned to read the subtle signs of strain around his eyes. "They've made overtures suggesting a willingness to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" "I don't have what they want. They've begun to accept that possibility." He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, which means they're looking for alternative resolutions. Hope flared briefly. "So it could be over? We could be free to leave?" Something flickered in his eyes, hurt, quickly masked. "Is that still what you want? To leave?" The question hung in the air between us, weighted with implications. 3 weeks ago, the answer would have been an unequivocal yes. Now, I wasn't so certain. Emma was happier than I'd seen her in years. I was rediscovering parts of myself I'd thought lost forever, and Adrian, I don't know. I admitted honestly. I just want options, for Emma's sake. He nodded slowly. I understand. And yes, if negotiations are successful, the immediate danger would be removed. You would have choices. The prospect of choices, real choices, not forced ones, should have brought only relief. Instead, it stirred a complicated mix of emotions I wasn't ready to examine too closely. What happens next? I asked, redirecting the conversation to practical matters. A meeting. Neutral ground. Terms to be discussed. Adrian's clipped sentences betrayed his distaste for the situation. I don't trust them, but I believe they're sincere in wanting to resolve this situation. It's become costly for them, drawing unwanted attention. I studied his face, noting the tension in his jaw, the carefully controlled anger in his eyes. You don't have to do this for us, I said softly. You've already done more than anyone could have expected. Adrian's gaze met mine, intense and unwavering. Everything I've done has been my choice, Olivia. A choice I would make again without hesitation. The conviction in his voice stirred something deep inside me. Over the past weeks, I'd watched him closely, looking for cracks in the facade, for signs of the dangerous criminal I'd been taught to fear. I'd seen glimpses of that man, intense phone calls, in hushed conversations with his security team, in the constant vigilance that never fully left his eyes, but I'd seen so much more as well. The man who patiently answered Emma's endless questions, who remembered how I took my coffee, who left art books on my nightstand that he thought might interest me, who looked at me when he thought I wouldn't notice, with a longing so profound it took my breath away. When is this meeting? I asked, breaking the charged silence between us. Tomorrow night. He straightened, his expression closing off slightly. I'll be leaving in the morning. The estate will be fully secured in my absence. You and Emma will be safe here. I want to go with you, I said, the words tumbling out before I'd fully formed the thought. Adrian's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. Out of the question. It could be dangerous. These people are hunting me because of something Ryan did, I argued, a strange determination taking hold. I should be there. Maybe if they see me, talk to me directly, they'll believe I don't have what they want, or they'll use the opportunity to take you, Adrian countered, his voice hardening. I won't risk it. It's not your risk to take, I shot back, surprising myself with my vehemence. It's mine, my life, my choice. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes, a reminder of exactly who I was arguing with. But instead of the anger I expected, his expression shifted to something like respect. Your courage is admirable, he said softly, but misplaced in this instance. These aren't men you can reason with, Olivia. They understand only power and leverage. Then I'm leverage, I insisted. Use me. Adrian was on his feet in an instant, moving with a fluid grace that belied his size. Never say that, he said, his voice dropping to a near growl. You are not a tool to be used. Not by me, not by anyone. The intensity of his reaction startled me. I stood as well, unwilling to have this conversation at a physical disadvantage. That's not what I meant. I meant that my presence could strengthen your position. Show them you're not hiding me, that there's nothing to hide. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the subtle cologne that had become achingly familiar over the past weeks. And if something went wrong, he asked, his voice low and intense. If they took you? Hurt you? What then? You wouldn't let that happen, I said with a certainty that surprised us both. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, followed by a fierce possessiveness that should have frightened me, but instead sent heat coursing through my veins. No, he agreed, his voice barely above a whisper. I wouldn't. We stood frozen in that moment, so close I could see the faint scar at his temple, the flecks of amber in his otherwise dark eyes. The tension between us had reached a breaking point, weeks of careful distance and growing attraction culminating in this charged silence. Adrian, I began, not even sure what I intended to say. He closed his eyes briefly as if gathering control. If you truly want to be present for this meeting, I will arrange it. But you will stay in the car until I determine it's safe. You will be surrounded by my security team at all times. And at the first sign of trouble, They will remove you immediately, regardless of your wishes. Those are my conditions. The concession was unexpected. I'd grown accustomed to his protectiveness, his tendency to make decisions he believed were in my best interest. This acknowledgement of my agency, however conditional, felt significant. "Thank you," I said simply. He nodded once, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Mrs. Petrov will stay with Emma. We'll leave at 9 tomorrow morning." The practical details settled, Adrian stepped back, restoring the careful distance he always maintained between us. "I should let you get back to your work," he said, gesturing to the forgotten catalog on the table. But I was suddenly weary of distance, of careful boundaries, of the unspoken currents that ran between us. "No," I said, making a decision I'd been approaching for days. "I think we should talk. Really talk." Wariness flickered in his eyes, quickly masked. About whatever this is. I gestured between us. "About why you've been watching me for weeks like a man starving but never taking a step closer. About why I keep telling myself I should be afraid of you but instead find myself—" I trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "Find yourself what, Olivia?" Adrian prompted, his voice so low it was almost a caress. "Drawn to you," I admitted, the truth both terrifying and liberating. "Thinking about you when you're not here. Wondering what it would be like if—" I couldn't finish the thought aloud. Adrian remained perfectly still, control evident in every line of his body. "If what?" If I stopped fighting this, whatever it is between us. The confession hung in the air, changing everything and nothing all at once. Adrian's expression softened, vulnerability replacing the careful mask he typically wore. "I've kept my distance because I wanted your choice to be real," he said finally. "Not born of gratitude or fear or obligation. I wanted you to see me, truly see me, and decide with clear eyes. And what would I see if I looked at you with clear eyes?" I challenged gently. "A man with blood on his hands," he said without hesitation, his honesty brutal. "A man who lives by a different code than most, who has done things that can't be undone." His voice dropped lower, but also a man who has wanted you with every fiber of his being since the moment he first saw you, who would burn down the world to keep you and Emma safe, who asks only for the chance to prove he can be worthy of you. The raw confession stole my breath. This was not the smooth manipulation of a practiced seducer, but the unvarnished truth of a man laying himself bare. "I'm afraid," I whispered, taking a step toward him rather than away. "Of me?" he asked, remaining perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. I shook my head slowly. "Of wanting this, of what it says about me that I could feel this way about someone like you." "Someone like me," he repeated, a shadow crossing his face. "A criminal, a killer, a protector," I corrected softly. "A man who carries my sleeping daughter with gentleness, who remembers how I take my coffee and leaves books he thinks I'll enjoy on my nightstand, who looks at me like I'm something precious." Something like hope flickered in his eyes, quickly tempered with caution. "I am all of those things, Olivia. The darkness and the light. I won't pretend otherwise, even to win you." I moved closer still, close enough that I would only need to lean forward slightly to touch him. "I don't want pretense. I've had enough of that to last a lifetime." "What do you want?" he asked. The question weighted with significance. "Tonight? Just this." I closed the remaining distance between us, placing my hand lightly on his chest. Even through the fabric of his shirt, I could feel the heat of him, the steady, strong beat of his heart. To stop pretending I don't feel what I feel. To stop maintaining this careful distance that's driving us both crazy. Adrian remained perfectly still beneath my touch, only the quickening of his heartbeat betraying his reaction. "And tomorrow, after the meeting, when you have real choices again?" "I don't know," I admitted honestly. "I can't promise you forever, Adrian. Not yet. But I'm not running anymore. Not from the Volkovs, not from you, not from whatever this is between us." He raised his hand slowly, telegraphing his movement as if giving me time to withdraw, and brushed a strand of hair from my face. The simple contact sent electricity racing across my skin. "That's enough," he said softly. "For now, that's more than enough." The air between us charged with possibility, with unspoken desire held carefully in check. I knew with absolute certainty that he would not take the final step, that despite the hunger evident in his eyes, he would wait for me to close the remaining distance, so I did. The press of my lips against his was tentative at first, an exploration rather than a surrender. Adrian remained still for a heartbeat before responding with exquisite restraint, his kiss gentle despite the tension radiating from his body. When we parted, his eyes had darkened, desire warring with his rigid self-control. "Olivia," he breathed, my name a question and a prayer. "Just kiss me," I whispered. "Stop thinking so much." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before he obliged, his hand coming up to cradle my face as he kissed me again, deeper this time, with an intensity that made my knees weak. I grasped his shoulders for support, shocked by the solid strength beneath my fingers, by the heat that pooled low in my belly at his touch. When we finally separated, both breathing harder, I saw something close to wonder in his expression. "We should stop," he said, though his body language suggested otherwise. "Before this goes further than you're ready for." The consideration in his words, his continuous prioritization of my comfort over his obvious desire, cemented something that had been building for weeks. This man, dangerous as he might be to others, would never harm me, would never take what wasn't freely given. "You're right," I conceded, though it cost me to step back. "Tomorrow will be complicated. We should be clear-headed." Adrian nodded, visibly gathering his control. "The meeting is set for 8 o'clock. We'll need to leave early to ensure everything is in place." The shift back to practical matters helped cool the heat between us, though the underlying current remained. "I should check on Emma," I said, needing some distance to process what had just happened. "Of course." Adrian stepped back, giving me space. "I'll see you at dinner?" I nodded, already moving toward the door. At the threshold, I paused, looking back at him. "Adrian?" "Yes?" "I don't regret it. Just so you know." Something like joy flashed across his face before settling into that small, private smile I'd come to treasure. "Neither do I, Olivia. Not for a moment." The next morning arrived with a sense of foreboding that not even the memory of Adrian's kiss could dispel. I dressed carefully in clothes laid out by Mrs. Petrov, a simple yet elegant navy dress and matching jacket that made me look more sophisticated than I felt. Emma was still sleeping when I checked on her, her face peaceful in the early morning light. I pressed a kiss to her forehead, inhaling her sweet scent and silently promising to return safely. "She'll be fine," Mrs. Petrov said from the doorway, her usually stern expression softened with understanding. "The house is secure, and I will not leave her side," I nodded, grateful for her steady presence. "Thank you. For everything." She surprised me with a brief embrace. "Be careful today," she murmured before releasing me. "And remember who you are dealing with, all of them." The warning was gentle but clear, a reminder not to let my growing feelings for Adrian blind me to the reality of his world. I carried it with me as I descended the stairs to find him waiting in the foyer. Adrian looked every inch the powerful businessman in a perfectly tailored dark suit, his expression inscrutable. Only his eyes betrayed any hint of our encounter the night before, a momentary softening when they met mine. "Ready?" he asked simply. "As I'll ever be." The drive to the meeting location was mostly silent. Adrian spent much of it on the phone, speaking in rapid Russian that I couldn't understand, occasionally switching to English to issue terse instructions to various associates. I watched the scenery change from rural countryside to increasingly urban landscapes, noting we were heading toward the city I'd fled weeks ago. "Where exactly are we meeting them?" I asked during a rare moment when Adrian wasn't on the phone. "A restaurant owned by a neutral party," he replied, his attention focused on the tablet in his lap. "Private dining room, separate entrances. Both sides will be allowed limited security inside, with additional forces stationed outside." The clinical precision with which he described what sounded like a diplomatic summit rather than a criminal negotiation was oddly reassuring. This wasn't a back-alley confrontation, but something approaching legitimate business. "And the terms?" I ventured. Adrian set the tablet aside, giving me his full attention. "They want assurances you don't have the information Ryan took. They want compensation for their losses. And they want guarantees that the matter ends here, with no retaliation." "Tu?" What kind of assurances could possibly satisfy them? I asked, the worry that had been simmering all morning bubbling to the surface. If they don't believe me, they won't be speaking to you directly. Adrian interrupted firmly. Your presence will be revealed only if absolutely necessary, and only under conditions I deem acceptable. I wanted to argue, but knew this was one point he wouldn't concede. Instead, I asked, and what do we get in return? Their permanent withdrawal. A formal agreement that you and Emma are off limits. Not just to them, but to anyone in their extended organization. His jaw tightened. An acknowledgement that any violation of these terms will result in immediate and overwhelming response. The threat implicit in his words reminded me again of exactly who he was. Not just the man who kissed me with gentle restraint, but a man with the power and willingness to wage war if necessary. We arrived at a nondescript building in the financial district, the car pulling into an underground garage where several black SUVs were already parked. Adrian's security team immediately surrounded the vehicle, creating a protective formation as we exited. You'll wait here until I send for you, Adrian said, nodding toward a small but elegantly appointed waiting room just off the garage. Dimitri and 2 others will remain with you. If anything happens, anything at all, they'll get you out immediately. I nodded, suddenly uncertain. The reality of the situation, that I was about to be peripherally involved in a negotiation between criminal organizations, hit me with full force. Adrian must have sensed my trepidation. He stepped closer, lowering his voice for my ears alone. Nothing will happen to you today. I give you my word. The absolute conviction in his tone steadied me. I reached out impulsively, straightening his already perfect tie. Be careful, I said softly. Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. Without warning, he pulled me closer, kissing me with the intensity that left me breathless. It was nothing like the restrained kiss we'd shared the night before. This was claiming, marking, a declaration of intent. When he released me, his eyes were dark with promise. When this is over, he said, his voice low and intimate, we're going to continue what we started last night. Before I could respond, he was gone, striding toward the elevator with his security team flanking him. I watched until the doors closed behind him, my heart racing with a complex mixture of fear, anticipation, and something dangerously close to love. Dimitri, Adrian's most trusted security man, ushered me into the waiting room with professional courtesy. It will likely be some time, Mrs. Taylor, he said, using my married name for the first time in weeks. Please, make yourself comfortable. The room, though small, was luxuriously appointed with plush seating, a small bar, and even a television discreetly mounted on one wall. I declined Dimitri's offer of a drink, too nervous to stomach anything, and instead paced the limited space, checking my phone repeatedly, though I knew Mrs. Petrov would contact me immediately if there were any issues with Emma. Time crawled. 1 hour stretched into 2, then 3. I alternated between sitting and pacing, trying not to imagine what was happening several floors above me. Dimitri remained a stoic presence by the door, his attention occasionally drawn to the earpiece he wore, but his expression revealed nothing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door opened. I looked up expectantly, but instead of Adrian, a different security man entered. He conferred briefly with Dimitri in hushed tones before they both turned to me. Mrs. Taylor, Dimitri said formally, your presence has been requested upstairs. My heart leapt into my throat. Is everything okay? Is Adrian... Mr. Costas is fine, Dimitri assured me. The negotiations are proceeding, but the Volkovs have requested to see you briefly. Mr. Costas has agreed, with conditions. I swallowed hard, nodding. All right, let's go. The elevator ride was tense. Dimitri and the other security man flanking me like solemn guardians. When the doors opened, we emerged into a plush hallway clearly belonging to an upscale restaurant. 2 more of Adrian's men stood outside a set of closed doors, stepping aside as we approached. Dimitri paused, turning to me. You will stay by the door. You will speak only if Mr. Costas indicates you should. If he gives the signal, we leave immediately. Understood? I nodded, squaring my shoulders as he opened the door. The private dining room beyond was elegant, dominated by a long table where several men sat. Adrian was at one end, his posture relaxed but alert, his expression revealing nothing as I entered. At the opposite end sat an older man with steel-gray hair and cold eyes that immediately fixed on me with unsettling intensity. "Mrs. Taylor," Adrian said formally, rising as I entered. "Thank you for joining us." I moved to stand beside him, acutely aware of the weight of every gaze in the room. The older man, Volkov himself, I presumed, studied me with clinical detachment. "So this is the woman who has caused so much trouble," he said, his accent thicker than Adrian's. "She doesn't look like someone who could outsmart my organization. That's because she didn't," Adrian replied coolly. "As I've explained, Mrs. Taylor had no knowledge of her husband's activities or the information he took. Her only crime was marrying the wrong man." Volkov's eyes narrowed. "And yet you have taken extraordinary measures to protect her. One might wonder why." "My reasons are my own," Adrian said, his tone making it clear the topic was closed. "Mrs. Taylor is here, as requested. You can see for yourself she is unharmed and under my protection. She has answered all your questions through me. Are you satisfied?" The older man's gaze remained fixed on me, searching for something I couldn't identify. "Tell me, Mrs. Taylor," he said suddenly, addressing me directly. "Did you love your husband?" The unexpected question caught me off guard. I glanced at Adrian, who gave a slight nod, permitting me to answer. "Yes," I said simply. "I loved the man I believed him to be." Something like understanding flickered in Volkov's cold eyes. "And now? Do you still love his memory, knowing what he was? What he did?" I considered the question, aware that my answer might have consequences beyond what I could anticipate. "I love the father of my child," I said carefully, "but I've come to understand that the man I married kept many secrets from me. I don't condone what he did to you or anyone else." Volkov studied me a moment longer before turning back to Adrian. "I believe her. She knows nothing." He gestured dismissively. "You may take her out now. We will conclude our business." Adrian's hand settled lightly on the small of my back, a subtle signal. I turned to go, escorted by Dmitri, but Volkov's voice stopped me at the door. "Mrs. Taylor." I turned, meeting his cold gaze directly. "Choose more wisely this time," he said, his eyes flicking meaningfully to Adrian. "Some men's secrets are worth keeping." Without waiting for a response, he turned back to Adrian, dismissing me entirely. Dmitri ushered me from the room, the heavy door closing behind us with finality. Back in the waiting room, time crawled again. I sat on the edge of my seat, unable to relax, wondering what was happening in that room, what decisions were being made that would affect Emma's future and mine. When the door finally opened again, nearly an hour later, Adrian entered alone. His expression was unreadable as he crossed to where I sat, tension radiating from his powerful frame. "Is it done?" I asked, rising to meet him. He nodded once, sharp and definitive. "It's done. You and Emma are officially off limits to the Volkovs and all their associates. Any violation will be considered an act of war against me personally." Relief made my knees weak. "So we're safe? Truly safe?" "Yes." Adrian's expression softened slightly. "You have choices now, Olivia, real choices. The implications hung between us." With the threat removed, my reason for staying with Adrian, for accepting his protection, was gone. I was free to take Emma and go, to rebuild our lives away from him and the dangerous world he inhabited. The thought sent an unexpected pang through my chest. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Adrian studied me, his dark eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. "That depends entirely on you." In that moment, standing in a luxury waiting room beneath a restaurant where criminal enterprises had just negotiated peace, I realized with perfect clarity what I wanted. The past weeks had changed me, had shown me not just who Adrian Costas was, but who I could be with him. Strong, valued, seen. "Take me home," I said simply. Something like hope flickered in Adrian's eyes, quickly tempered with caution. "Home!" I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint scar at his temple, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes, the pulse beating steadily at his throat. "To Emma, to the estate, to wherever you are." I took a deep breath, gathering courage. I choose you, Adrian. Not because I need your protection now, but because I want to see where this leads. Because when you look at me, I feel truly seen for the first time in years. The control he maintained so rigidly cracked, raw emotion flooding his expression. Olivia, he breathed, my name a prayer on his lips. Are you certain? I need you to be certain. I'm certain that I want to try, I said honestly. I can't promise forever yet, but I can promise today and tomorrow and the day after that. I can promise to be honest about what I feel, what I want. I can promise not to run from this, from us. Adrian reached out slowly, giving me time to withdraw, and cradled my face in his hands. For a man who has everything, he said softly, you are the only thing I have ever truly wanted. The simple declaration undid me. I leaned into his touch, closing the distance between us to press my lips to his. Unlike our previous kisses, this one held no reservation, no careful restraint. It was a beginning, a promise, a declaration. When we finally parted, Adrian rested his forehead against mine, his voice rough with emotion. Let's go home, to Emma, to our future, whatever it may hold. Hand in hand, we walked toward the elevator, toward the waiting car, toward a life I never could have imagined when I fled to that abandoned cabin just weeks ago. A life with a man who had been a stranger, then a protector, and now something much more complex and precious. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if the peace Adrian had negotiated would last forever, or if other threats might emerge from his complicated world. I didn't know if the growing feelings in my heart would ultimately blossom into the kind of love that lasts a lifetime. But for the first time since Ryan's death, perhaps for the first time in my adult life, I was choosing my own path, eyes wide open, heart unguarded. And as Adrian's hand tightened around mine, his dark eyes filled with a tenderness reserved only for me, I knew with absolute certainty that I was finally exactly where I was meant to be. Not hiding, not running, but found, at last, by a man who had been searching for me all along.